Were you raised by an emotionally immature, toxic, or narcissistic parent? Or did you just have a really difficult childhood and now you're not really able to decipher whether your parent is actually emotionally immature or narcissistic? And also, why does it even matter to give them a title? Past is in the past. What's done is done. Why does it matter? Why are we blaming our parents for what happened to us? Well, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist who works with people that have been traumatized, mostly children of narcissistic parents and mostly women that are daughters of narcissistic parents that come to me with all sorts of symptoms in their current life that are all traced back to their childhood. And as a hypnotherapist and somebody who works with the subconscious mind, this matters, not so that we have somebody to blame for our issues and our difficulties, but so that we actually understand ourselves, validate our experience, create empathy for who we are, and stop blaming ourselves for our own victimization. Because what happens when we are raised in abuse that wasn't obvious, or we don't allow ourselves to accept that it was indeed abusive, we continue living our lives invalidated and invisible to our own selves, to our own needs, and to our own pain. And if we do that for that place, right, the childhood and everything that happened to us, that means that we will continue to invalidate ourselves, doubt ourselves, question our emotions our entire life, which means that whatever residue our childhood left us with, negative beliefs, having so many defense mechanisms, being self-destructive, hating ourselves, feeling unworthy, all these souvenirs are going to carry on being part of who we are, that we can never challenge or question because that's what it is. So essentially, understanding who raised us and what that has done to us is only done so that we begin to enter this process that is self-validation, which is so empowering, because if you've been raised by a narcissistic and emotionally immature parent, one of the most painful things that have happened to you throughout that experience is constant invalidation that makes you question your own reality, your own feelings, your own perception of what is the truth. So basically, us doing this work has nothing to do with the parents per se, but they're the vehicle that helps us go back to the past and see what happened to us. And through that, to be able to finally heal. So many people who grew up in toxic homes struggle to define why things felt wrong, right? Because you may have had a relatively good childhood. You even have some good memories. You were traveling. You always had the clothes that you wanted to buy. You always had things. So from a distance, and as an adult, if you're looking at your childhood, or if you're even comparing your childhood with someone else, you're like, well, I don't know. My childhood was just fine. My childhood was great. And if someone says that to me in a session, I'm like, here we go. Because if we're saying my childhood is fine, which is great, and I wish that to everybody, but we are struggling with addiction, with limerence, self-destruction, perfectionism. We get out of, each relationship that we get out of is worse than the last. So we're chronically dating and choosing people that end up really, really ruining us. We have fears of intimacy. We have self-hatred. We compare ourselves with everybody. We are stuck in our lives. We hate ourselves, all these things, right? So if we show up in the world like that and we say, but my childhood was great, there's some dissonance there. And bridging all of this distance is what we call the healing journey, right? Going back to the past and understanding what happened to us so that we can finally heal from it. Because we can't heal if we're not even owning up to the fact that we were hurt and we're thinking, I'm just flawed, I'm problematic, I am like that. My sister turned out just fine. What's wrong with me? And since I said that, I want to touch on something before we start, that you may have had the same parents, you and your siblings, but you had a different childhood. If you were the scapegoat, different childhood. If you were the golden child, different childhood. If you were anybody else other than you possibly had a different childhood than your sibling, even if you were raised together. All right, so comparing yourself and saying, well, my sister ended up fine, and that's how you've evolved and you've developed and you adapted to dysfunction. Your sister may have adapted in different ways. That can be also really bad, but may not be visible to you, right? So for example, you have two siblings. One is going all the way down to the root of, addiction. The other one is depressive. The other one is a workaholic. The other one is a perfectionist. The other one is codependent, right? Like there's all sorts of ways in which we will respond. Our system will respond to abuse, and that will show up differently in each and every one of us, right? But what happens is if we observe our current lives of today as historians that we are, us working with the subconscious mind, all of these things are used like a thread, like an Ariadne's thread, back to your psyche to find where they came from. And as we do all of that and we go through that journey, we are realizing what made us us. And then that awakens our authentic self. Because if we're going through those layers of who we became in order to survive, and we're slowly shedding them because they no longer have power over us, those instincts of survival are no longer instincts now that we know and feel and remembered and grieved whatever was behind it. Now we get closer and closer to our authentic self, which then means that a lot of our current life will have to be a little bit rearranged, but that's for another topic. Now, so I want to explain also and say that, we call them narcissistic parents. They're not diagnosable, right? We are falling under the umbrella of what is the narcissistic traits, which are pretty pervasive and observed through and through many people's childhoods. And many people wrote about it, but this is an idea, right? This is not you going to your parent afterwards and say, you know what, you're a narcissist. I have videos about that. Don't tell your parents the terms that you're learning. They're going to flip them and actually tell you, actually, you are the narcissist. You abused me. Where's your accountability? And all that. So don't. So I want you to understand that all narcissistic parents are emotionally mature, but not everybody who is emotionally mature is also highly narcissistic and abusive, right? There's a vast experience within that. Narcissistic parents are especially self-absorbed. They're very controlling and manipulative. And emotionally mature parents may be neglectful, passive, clueless, but not necessarily grandiose or intentionally cruel, right? And as I said before, the idea for doing this is not to blame them per se, but it's to understand ourselves, to find ourselves, our authentic selves, through how we were created. And validation, self-validation is a powerful process to get us started, right? So let's see, what are the signs of toxic and emotionally mature parents? Sign number 1, everything is about them. This is the self-absorbed parent. Every conversation is about their feelings, what they need, their problems. And then your emotions were, in this context, treated as inconvenience or dismissed. So these people, these parents, were unable to self-reflect, and nothing was ever their fault, right? It's all about them and them and them, but not when it comes to picking up some responsibility for any blame, right? Number 2, you probably walked on eggshells around them. This is the unpredictable parent, and many of you will relate having all of these types of parents. Don't panic. This is quite common. So these types of parents had a lot of mood swings, right? And these mood swings dictated how everybody in the household was allowed to exist, right? You weren't supposed to make noise or say something when they're upset, or you were supposed to play along when they were happy, although right before that, they sort of came in and ruined everybody's day. And then you kind of like had to adapt to their feelings and to be like, what is their mood today? And a lot of you may recognize even how they're feeling by the way you can hear their footsteps on the stairs, which is a painful thing to even conceptualize, that you would use that as a cue to understand if you were in danger or not. Number 3, sign of an emotionally immature and toxic parent, narcissistic parent. They forced you to be their caregiver. They were very emotional. This is the emotional parent. So instead of caring for you in your emotional world, they expected you to care for their emotional world. And so they vented to you, they told you their problems, they told you about what's happening with the other parent, they told you about the other parent. So they kind of lured you in this triangle between them and the other parent, which honestly messed you up because you had to choose between these people. You were forced to choose a side, which was a really, really, really painful thing. And also becoming responsible for the feelings of an adult is a very heavy responsibility when we're kids. Now we have the parent who weaponized love and affection. And this is a very typical experience. They were giving you love, or sort of some expressions of love, which a lot of the times were just giving you money or saying one good thing, whatever, and then forgetting about it. But only when you behaved correctly. So it was conditional. And it was upon agreed, or, performances, really. And then what happened with this is that also there was no predictability. For example, they would expect you to get an A, right? You got the A, they were nice to you, then you keep getting an A, and they're like, yeah, whatever, what's new, whatever. So it's not like you could ever secure or predict what would make them be good to you or give you love. But there were certain things that you learned. It could be because you were a good athlete, or you were a great student, or whatever it was that they sort of deemed valuable in you. And they praised you for that, and then completely rejected you if you were doing anything short of that, right? So if you got an A minus, they were like, what is this? Where's the plus? Kind of thing, right? So you never felt safe in their love, and you never felt accepted by them. Everything was very transactional. Now, another sign of toxic parents is that they're very controlling and rigid. They're very controlling. They see your independence and individuality as a threat, because they want you to exist and serve their own expectations. So personal growth, therapy, self-reflection, no, because all of that opens your eyes. Actually, the biggest sort of enemy of a narcissistic parent is their child actually going to therapy and feeling validated for what happened to them, because they can no longer control them, right? So generally they want to keep controlling you, and someone can only control you if they control the idea that you have for yourself, right? And they become the only place where you go for validation, and the only place you go for support, and the only place you go for everything, right? So they keep you close, but in a way that's so controlling, and you can't just exist in your life alone, which means you can't get more references around what are you worth, what are you really good at, what people value about you. They become your only reference. And that is so dangerous and so difficult in our path of finding ourselves, right? Because we go out in the world and we're always looking for a leader, someone to tell us what to do, how to think, what to feel, what's wrong with us. And we don't learn how to self-reflect and have our own opinion, which is why it's such a rebellious act to do our healing work, because if we're able to actually validate ourselves and be like, you know what? I'm good. I'm all right. I'm a good person. What they're saying is not true. When we start questioning authorities like that, their whole oppressive system collapses. But then they'll say, oh, it's your therapist's fault, or these friends that you're having now are putting you up for this, or it's, whatever. They'll blame someone else. But if your parent is doing that to you now that you're in your healing journey, that's a good sign. It means you're breaking free from the illusion. So don't stop doing it. Now, another type of toxic parent is the hypercritical and shaming parent. This is trademark narcissistic parent, right? Nothing you ever do is good enough. You're constantly criticized and held to impossible standards, imaginary standards that don't exist. Or if they existed, there's somebody else that they've idolized, right? Your cousin, your sister, your brother, themselves, the past selves, or whatever thing that they decided they have to put you up against, and you can never reach it. And once, even if you ever do reach it, then that bar is going to go even higher. Because the idea is that you never reach the potential that they see in you, because the potential that they see in you is that you're always going to fall short from what they want you to be. You're not good enough for them. That's their idea. So they have you chasing your own tail to become good enough for them, but nothing is ever going to be good enough for them. So quite the losing game. Another sign of a toxic and emotionally immature parent is that they used fear, guilt, or shame to control you, right? So these parents guilt you, they force you into a religious dogma, they shame you, they keep you humble, because they want to keep you obedient. So that they're going up, they're really capitalizing on your sense of fear, guilt, and shame to keep you under control. And these parents damage so much of our psyche and prohibit our self-expression. because we're being so shamed by having questions or questioning things or not obeying with the things that they want. It's just horrible. And on top of shame, they'll add the fear. And on top of fear, they'll add the guilt. These are really powerful experiences for a child that really break you down and shut you down eventually. So you stop questioning, you stop confronting them, because instead of guidance, you just get threats, you get guilt or extreme consequences. They're very authoritarian in that way. But the means that they're going through it are really, really difficult, and then damage your own sense of just existing without feeling guilt, shame, or be afraid that somebody's going to punish you, right? Now, the other sort of trait of such a toxic parent is that they cannot handle disagreement and boundaries. They're super entitled to you, your body, your experience, your life. You're not allowed to have boundaries. You're not allowed to have a self. They consider you a child, no matter how old you are, and they treat you as such. And when I say child, when we're talking about these types of parents, I mean they don't treat you nicely and kindly as you would treat a child or talk to you in baby talk. They just abuse you, because narcissistic parents do not respect their children's individuality. They don't respect their personhood. They don't respect their authenticity. They consider them as extensions of themselves, and, like they're not supposed to have an opinion. They're supposed to be told what to do, which is why a lot of you may be 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. I don't know how old you are, but they are still talking to you the way they did when you were a child. So they never actually even woken up to the fact, wait a minute, they're an adult. I'm going to have to let them take their own decisions. No, I know best. I always know best. To which I say, it's really, really mind-blowing that they know best about every single thing, except about parenting your child in a way that doesn't severely traumatize them for the rest of their lives. But if you were to say that to them, they'll shame you and be like, get over it. You wouldn't last a day in my childhood. Do you know what happened to me? And you see, nothing wrong. Nothing wrong came out of that. I turned out just fine. When somebody says I turn out just fine, and everybody else around them is like traumatized for life, I am thinking that the problem is that someone lacks the ability to self-reflect. Now, lastly, another sign of such parent, toxic and narcissistic parent, is that they rewrote reality, dismiss your feelings, they gaslight you. This is like the way that they do things. So you had clear memories of things, even as a child, they lied in your face, you're remembering it wrong. They would invalidate you constantly. You're overreacting. This never happened. You're just being sensitive. So they make it so that eventually you stop doubting them, and you start doubting your own experiences. Again, if they're the only point of reference, and you go to them and say, you know what, I was in therapy today, and I remember that one day this and this happened. They're like, what are you talking about? This never happened. And if you have no other reference points, you're like, oh, because your mind is very susceptible to their authority. And when you're not able to self-validate, you'll always question yourself first before you question them. I mean, they've been doing this to you for years, so you can understand that they've built you up. So when they say something, it's not that way, you're like, oh, okay, it's not. And eventually you're not connected with your own reality, so you can't validate yourself, and then they manage to somehow always make you feel horribly. So you may go to them with a complaint about something and leave that door feeling horribly because suddenly you're an ungrateful child, and everything they did is just in your imagination. So what do we do? If you found yourself being like, oh, that's my parent, and if you also found yourself that all of these traits check, know again that you're not alone. This is not a solitary experience. Although it was a lonely one to have when you were a kid, it wasn't really unique. And that's unfortunate. And at the same time, there's some relief with that, because I hope it just removes a little bit that feeling of thinking that you were going crazy or something was so wrong with you that you deserve to be treated like that. But what I want you to do with everything that we're doing today is find a way to reflect more on those stories that shaped you. So start journaling about events that happen and don't ask for their validation. Just say, "Oh, I remember when I was a child, this thing happened to me." So I'm sure you may have started already thinking about things as I'm talking about this. And I want you to take some time and write every day. So write a few stories every day. And then take a while and then go back to whatever you wrote, but read it as if someone else wrote it, not you. So don't read it like you're reading your diary, but read it as if somebody's sending you a letter telling you what happened to you, telling you what happened to them, right? So as you're writing them, write them as the child that you were. And then when you read them as if you're reading the story of some child somewhere else that is possibly not you. And I say this because a lot of you have a very hard time being kind and empathic to yourself. But I'm pretty sure that if you were to see a child in distress, your empathy would kick in because you're not monsters like your parents. But so I want this to be activated through this way of doing it. And let me know how it goes. And if you want, you can also share things in the comments and we can validate you, right? You can share some stories and people can say also their own stories. And then you see that you were not alone. And also you will see yourself have empathy for what's happened to other people, which is similar to what happened to you. And then slowly, you may find the path to actually have direct empathy for yourself, right? I also want to tell you, because I have to say it, right? This exists. I created something that is really meaningful and really impactful when it comes to healing. And it's a 21-day hypnotic journey that takes you through your childhood in moments that are important, in relationships that are important, in things that created you, and helps you heal those. But in the process, it also teaches you how to reparent yourself, how to put yourself into hypnosis, right? Self-hypnosis, how to regulate, how to respond to triggers. And then all of this path ends and finalizes in a session where we reclaim your generational worth. So we go from trauma, not just to grieve the trauma, we go straight to finding and embodying finally our sense of worth. This is very powerful work. This is really impactful work. This is work that I've done on myself, but just took me a lot more time to do it and figure out which steps I had to take. This is the work that I use with my clients, and this is the work that so many of you have engaged in and are sending me reflections, and I'm seeing that so many things are coming up, which means that the people who travel through this are never going to be the same people who started, because this kind of work changes you. The subconscious mind work is really powerful and transformative. So if you want to do that, check out for Heal, and you'll find it somewhere in the links. And then that's it. I want you to remember that what happened to you was not your fault, even though they made you feel this way. And you thinking that it was your fault or you deserved it is actually part of the abuse. And I want us to keep finding ways to keep tracing it back so that we don't feel this way anymore, blaming ourselves for our own victimization and of the past and of current, because this is a recurrent pattern, right? If it happened then, it keeps happening now. And for us to break patterns, as I always say, we have to go to the place where they were created and heal there. So I hope this helps, and I'll see you guys soon.